Welcome, Kathy. It's been so many months for us to get this organized.
Thank you, Shilpa. It's good to be here finally with you.
Oh, absolutely. Before I hit record, we were just having a conversation around the ever changing technology space. And you were also sharing that you are now doing your own solopreneurship. And I would love to hear about your thoughts on being in that space, but then big picture, mindfulness and leadership.
hmm Sure. So yeah, I actually one of the areas that I focus on in my business is mindful leadership and what does it entail and how can one develop more of that mindset either for themselves or for their teams or if in a capacity for their organization. Mindful leadership, basically, let's have a definition of it first, which is a style of leadership that involves being present, open minded, and compassionate with others while being mindful of the needs of yourself. So there is an element of self compassion in there as well.
That's a good definition. That's a good definition, given that my spiritual approach, and as you were just chatting with me about it, is that having the understanding of self-realization and approaching things and from the perspective that you too are a work in progress.
Right, that is more of a developmental approach, if we want to put it, which is realizing that nobody is a finished product. We are always can be evolving, and if there is that notion of moving from the fact that if I get to this point I'm done and over, to moving into the fact that there is really no done and over. It is an ever going evolution during this lifetime, or maybe beyond, who knows, because maybe our souls evolve too in their own way. But yes, the notion is that this is an ongoing journey.
I love that perspective, particularly as you put the lens on leadership, because of my own personal experience, which may not have always been the most enlightened or positive experience, but being someone who is highly sensitive and highly spiritual from a young age, and then being in the realm of corporate environments where it's always been interesting seeing people being in leadership that want to put you in a box and want to put a label, and versus somebody like you, Kathy, who may have had this broader perspective as you engaged with different people. Can you share with me those challenges and how you are able to still cohesively work with others who may not have the same leadership style?
Well, that's a really good point because, in order for a human resources professional to be able, or a recruiter to be able to recruit people, they get a job description and, well, they used to look at the resumes. As we were discussing with the AI advances, I don't think any eyeballs look at any resume anymore. It's just a machine that scans for a bunch of keywords, and if you hit those keywords, you will get an interview. If you don't, you will not get an interview. As simple as that. Now, the thing is that can are we reducing humans to those words in their resume, which a professional resume at its best for industry needs to be maximum 2 pages. So what do we do? Do we go and put a lot of keywords in our resumes? That's a reductionist approach. Um, as a matter of fact, always was thinking there should be a different way of screening candidates. And I'm hoping that with the AI advances, we will see a different way of screening candidates, because this is no way any reflection of a person's talent or ability or skills that they can bring to the table. But the interest of time, I think that has been what has been available to the professionals in that field since, I don't know, 19th century or whatever the case is. But coming back to the fact that how do you navigate that, it is very hard, because when somebody is looking for a job, they are thinking that I have to find somebody with the exact same experience, or somebody that I can be sure that they can exactly do what I'm thinking in my mind, which is honestly, as a person who have hired a lot of people in my own field, that's very simplistic thinking, because it doesn't, if they have done something well, is that the only thing you need, or do you need a person with a broader mind and broader scope and thinking, or do you want somebody who has done the same thing for 20 years? I mean, what kind of person do you want to hire? That's a question that normally hiring managers do not think about it a lot. They mostly think about what the skills am I looking for, but they do not look what kind of capacity, what kind of characteristics I'm looking for in a person. And that's the dimensions of a human being that we miss considering, and we happen to waste our own time and the time of other people, or miss out on the opportunity of bringing some amazing people to our teams.
I am curious when you were talking about a broader perspective and understanding
Mm.
the person that for which you were hiring. How do you identify what those other qualities are? I mean, I certainly can speak to it, but I would love to have your perspective as putting on the lens of mindfulness as well.
So there are different ways of evaluating what you are looking for. I'm going to give you an example of something that I recently did with a client, which my client has a very good team. And for when we started working together, the team had some kinks. And the kinks were coming from the fact um, that he had hired people based on diversity. And I'm advocating for diversity. I come from a different background. But one thing is that we have to understand diversity by itself cannot always hold what is needed. You need to have the merit. You need to be able to hold on and be able um, to catch up with an environment, or you will be miserable, frankly, even if you're getting given the chance. And the person was experiencing that, oh, I did not rely on my network this time. I went and hired people to be have a more diverse team, and now I'm feeling, seeing that the team has some kinks. And one thing that we did was using one of the assessment disc profile assessments to see, okay, what is the combination of the people in your team? What kind of characteristics do these people have? Do you have people who are very, all of them very analytic? Do you have people that are able to sell somebody something? Or is it more of a balanced team, or is it more heavy on one particular aspect? And yes, we found that a particular characteristic is heavier in his team, which is totally fine, considering that I'm talking about an analytical team and I'm talking about a person in a leader in technology. That is totally fine. But it is important, as I learned in my journey of corporate leadership, you need to have a balance. If you have all people that just want to solve problems and nobody wants to talk about how they have solved the problem, you don't have a representative from your team, because everybody just wants to solve problems. So how do we do that? One thing that we did next time that he wanted to hire a talent, we analyzed, okay, what is it that you're heavy on? What is it that you have less of it? And this role that you're looking for, what does it really need? What do you think? What kind of a person needs? Do you need somebody that is just very good into coding? Do you need somebody that's more outgoing? Do you think that, what kind of characteristics do you want to see in that person? And for the first time, he actually was able to go back to the HR of the company and say, the people that you think are right for me to interview or to go through the process, can we have them have a disc assessment to see what kind of characteristics they have? And that was a very unusual thing. There are all these assessments available, but people, like organizations, do not really use them. There is data available. Use your data intelligently. You do yourself a service, you do the candidates a service. But there is a shift that needs to happen in the consciousness of the people, in the awareness of the people. When you are talking about mindful leadership, yes, we can do the same thing that we have done for the 20 years and go on with it, or we can start being more present with what's happening in the world. There is a lot of tools, there's a lot of technology, there is a lot of data available. I don't know it. Maybe I can ask the HR to look into it. Maybe I can ask the recruiter to look into it. It's a matter of opening yourself up to other possibilities rather than thinking, oh, I know it all. I know what works.
Absolutely. Do you find that under that perspective, that I would call it a growth mindset perspective, is
Hmm.
something that is even needed not just within, say, HR, which I would imagine that they're more cutting edge because they have to continually help the company find the talents and retain the talents, but within, I would say, the trenches of legacy
Hmm.
teams, and
Hmm.
how do you make that shift in thinking so that, or how do you become influential in that shift in thinking that we need to think beyond the skill sets we have and thinking about expanding how
Hmm.
we are bringing people in. So there's a balance, or as well as I I I, I don't know the right word for it, but the new energy.
Yeah, yeah, I get what you say. So let's think about this even from a mindfulness perspective, which in mindfulness, one of the things that we learn is to have a beginner's mind. And in corporate world, what you are praised for is your expertise. So how can you show a growth mindset while not clinging to your expertise? That's a challenging position to be. But the whole theory of Carl Dweck that came up with the idea of growth mindset is, can I let go of my attachment to what I think I know? Because who is to say what you think you know is the ultimate?
That
So,
even, go
yeah,
ahead.
please. No, go ahead.
No, no, it just reminded me of an instance during my corporate days where, and this might be related to the point you just made, that sometimes even, right, um, that having the ability to understand the history of a team and the evolution of whatever they're working on,
Mm-hmm.
taking that into account can help tremendously because that history is going to tell you the story of where they were and how far they've come.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah. That is important.
and so then if you take that into account from the HR and leadership perspective, that also helps you with this growth mindset. Now, have you seen the history of teams or history of products be factored in as teams evolve?
Um, There is no doubt that the history plays a role. I mean, people need to know what has happened before in order not to repeat the same mistakes or even the same learnings. So that's an important factor, no doubt about that. But the problem comes when there is clinging and when there is fear to pull the plug, especially if you are venturing into a territory that you are thinking, I don't wanna pull the plug because it might look like a failure. But sometimes being able to pull the plug halfway through an effort, when we know this, we see that this is not going well, that is this definition of the right mind. So all of this requires one thing, and that is evaluating in the moment by moment, what seems to be the right thing to do. That moment by moment is key. So if we feel we are an expert and if we feel that we've seen till the end of it, we don't see many possibilities. But if you are thinking, what am I missing by not seeing it? When evolve and constantly questioning and having that inquiry, then we will see there are many possibilities. I mean, there is a famous quote that it says, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." So that's a very beautiful quote from Suzuki that I think we all can remember when we feel like I I know this is gonna work. How do you know? Is there the only way to work? Can we become more curious and go into it and still question, is it still the right thing to do? What is telling me that this is the right thing to do?
Yes. So three things come to mind based on this point you just made. When decisions need to be made by leaders in organizations, there is historically a tug of war between the old school thinking, or maybe
Hmm.
history based thinking, and the fact that expertise sometimes has a greater weight, and rightly so, because they also may have the history and maybe scientific data. But then balancing that with the idea of what I often think was like a startup mentality, which is more growth mindset, and when to learn how to pivot. And what does your leadership and mindfulness lens tell you about that idea? Because it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is we need to be able to have the curious mindset, ask the questions, so that we know if we need to make a change, it's time to make the change.
Right. So yeah, it's that agile thinking, and agile thinking definitely is easier when you have a smaller team, a smaller a number of stakeholders than when you're in a big enterprise or a corporation with many stakeholders. That is a given. But there is something in here, and that is that agile thinking doesn't need to be with regards to the whole project or a whole program. You can have that vision for the whole thing, but still have checkpoints or markers that can tell you about how the project is going. I have had the experience of being in a software development project that I think it turned out to be way over budget. I don't know, over $10 million or whatever was the budget at that time. And we kept going. Um, it was a legacy technology that we were using to to develop something further and further and further and have reporting with newer technology on top of it. But the legacy thing, there were not enough developers who would know that legacy technology. So the moment that we started that project, a lot of the people sitting at that table, they did not like this idea of putting this much money on the development based on a legacy project, considering that there was only one person that really knew that legacy system, legacy technology very well, and she was charging this company an arm and a leg at that time because she was the only person that she knew, and putting all your eggs in one basket. But the CTO of that company was under pressure by the business because the business liked whatever they had been used to forever and a day, and they were pushing him and telling him, we give you the money, go build it. That project went way over budget, but nobody had the guts to go and pull the plug, and everybody was blaming each other. We fired a lot of people along the way, but that didn't change anything because there was something wrong. So going back to your thing, uh, yes, agile thinking sometimes can work, but agile thinking needs an environment that nurtures courageous thinking and logical thinking. When you are in an environment that these things are not welcome, you cannot be agile. I mean, a lot of things go out of the window. So some of it goes back to the culture of a company, culture of an organization, culture of a group, even. Because with bigger organization, Somebody comes and asks you, okay, what is your experience with DirecTV? Well, I know my experience with IT at DirecTV because that's where I worked. Now, DirecTV is a huge company. I don't know about the marketing. I don't know about the programming. So if I venture to answer that question, that would be a wrong question. It's the metaphor that the Rumi, an elephant, that people wanted. They were examining parts of an elephant in the famous story by Rumi and thinking, what is this? Well, you cannot judge a company and its culture based on one part of this. So there are a lot of nuances that goes before you can say if agile thinking works or not, even in a big organization.
I love that analogy. I've been in, my background is software engineering back
Mm-hmm.
and development. And multiple times I've been on a project where there's a hodgepodge of stakeholders involved. There are different roles. It can be a test of your true mindfulness and spiritual skills. And like I can write a novel on that. Those You've got somebody holding the tusk of the elephant who says, I am the leader because I've been around for 50 years and I know everything. And they probably do know a lot, but their incentive or motivation may be very different than somebody who's like the agile leader or the project manager or the
Right.
leadership. Each person has a different incentive. Somebody may have the incentive of, I simply want to retire and not lose my job, which fair as well. But having all of these different incentives and agendas and goals, and then the big picture, which is getting the product to market,
Mhm.
that can be a test of our true spirituality and mindfulness. And I'd like to hear you tell me, like, how do you survive? Not, thriving would be great, but how do you survive as someone who is spiritual and a leader who's truly in it because they want to see the expansion of these humans for the betterment of whatever it is that they're creating.
This is a really, really, really good question, Shilpa, because because in corporate America, you have to deliver. I'm sure you remember those days. You have to deliver. You have to deliver within budget, within the time frame, all of that. So delivering is a given. And it can be at the expense of you working weekend, working 80-hour weeks, whatever the case is. So then the thing that becomes very crucial in here is that what keeps my people motivated, what keeps them going. And i I have some answers, but there is, it's by no means a conclusive list of what is possible. But I can tell you, like, I uh, I have a client who works for one of the big tech companies, and uh, she was she has a boss who is very much about delivering, and she's a very high level person. And then she was imitating the same thing because that's what the boss is saying. And then when we started working together, she realized, oh, there is something called development. And we talked about emotional agility because the emotional agility is very key in these environments. And emotional agility can make a difference. Why do I say that? Because you do not, we all have emotions, we all feel something. And some of us allow ourselves to feel it, some of us do not allow ourselves to feel it. And some of us get stuck in our own feelings. We go to a meeting and we are presenting, and we see that, for example, the VP leaves the room. I bet you that most people will lose track of what they're thinking, because in their mind they start making a story. Why did the VP leave? What did I say? I lost him. I lost his interest. And you lose the rest of the session because you're so focused on that. So emotional agility is being able to recognize, I am feeling nervous or agitated because you left. You're a human. Fine. But can you recuperate and not lose the rest of these other 10 people that are sitting there looking at you? So there, the deadlines and those things, they are a fact, but there are ways of building capacities in yourself, in your team, looking at things differently, helping your people develop so they can develop these kind of capacities that we are talking about, like emotional agility that I just mentioned.
I love the way this conversation is going because we talked just moments ago about the concept of shifting and pivoting and knowing when to do it, and then bringing it up to being more conscious, being more deliberate and intentional in how you are engaging with your peers or
Mhm.
how you are leading others. Because now that you have that lens, Kathy, in knowing perhaps when somebody has left a room, how that might change the temperament or emotions of those, particularly those who may not be as in tune with their mindfulness.
Right. You cannot control people, but you can control yourself. So if you look at the definition of emotional agility, it is the process of accepting your own emotions and using them as information rather than trying to change them. So if you're able at that time to see, okay, I felt agitated, maybe I should take a 3 breaths and bring myself to the moment. If you are able to ground yourself, the people who are watching you, they will feel that too. So you cannot control other people in the world, but you can control yourself. You can be mindful of your own thoughts and feelings and approaching them in a productive way at the moment. Because, one of the pieces that we live in mindfulness is that you need to learn what you have control over and let go of what you don't have control over.
And when we just were talking about the analogy of the elephant, and I mentioned to you that my experience of the elephant in the room and going through those scenarios in the software engineering development cycles is that it was a true test of my spiritual strength or lessons I needed to still learn. And I believe that what you've laid out is a foundation for someone perhaps who's still very young and entering the field
Mhm.
of, of working in any environment, whether it's corporate or startup, and having that mindful leadership lens, whether they're receiving that coaching directly or
Mhm.
perhaps they have to learn to become their own coach, which is
Mhm.
what a lot of us have to do. Unfortunately, I think it would be nice to know though, how could you offer maybe like 3 tips? It could be for someone young who's entering this area and
Mhm.
they feel stuck because I've been there. I
Mhm.
wish I'd received your knowledge and wisdom 20 plus years ago.
I wish the same thing to Shilpa, because I have been in those boats myself too. Please continue. What are some 3 things for a young person starting? Okay, I, this is really basic, but remember that your breath controls your mind. And if you do not know what I mean by that, when you're listening to this podcast, you need to know that. You need to know that. That's your survival mechanism in corporate world. Number one. And number two is Learn to lose fear, whatever that means for you. Even if you have to hire somebody and learn, deal with it, do not forget that, because it's the fears that will keep us at one place, that will keep us losing that agility. It will keep us small. So learn to lose the fear. And the third thing that I can think of is that the biggest mistake is not asking questions and asking for help.
And that all three, I could not agree more. All of them, like the breath work. Oh my gosh. And it's like, even for someone like myself who was raised in a spiritual environment, understands meditation, I have made complete ignorant statements like, well, it's so easy, it's right there. It's sometimes not, especially when our ego comes in the way. And number two, the fear. Now, my guru's guru, I'm sure you've heard this quote, but fear nothing but fear itself.
Hmm.
Again, if I had had that coach in my ear growing up in the corporate space, how many choices and decisions have maybe Kathy you made? I can certainly attest to it that either consciously or unconsciously, the fear is driving your performance, which is unfortunate because then you may not be shining the way you deserve.
Yeah, will keep yourself small. That's
Now,
what it is.
what was the third point you made? I had something to add to that.
Oh, the third point was, oh gosh, um, don't ever forget to ask for help or ask questions.
Okay, that is interesting as well because I now that I work for myself, I'm still constantly learning. Constantly. I'm taking classes and
Mm.
improving skill sets. And I was in a situation the other day where I was the one, as usual, asking. And I went to my husband right afterwards and I said, you know what? In this little cohort I'm in, it turns out it was good that I asked those questions because everyone else had the same questions. And had I let fear overcome me, I would not have gotten the answers I needed because other people were not asking only because of fear.
Right, right, right. Fear, thinking, oh, they will think that I don't know, or thinking that if I ask for help, I'm weak. I mean, especially asking for help is a big deal. People think that they have to solve everything themselves. And, and that will just waste your time and energy.
Absolutely. Now, Kathy, we brought the conversation around the three tips for perhaps someone who is still green or young or new to any particular domain. It could be professional life or coaching or startup. It could even apply to your personal life. But
Hmm.
now the other end of the spectrum, I know of people who are perhaps in their second act or their
Yeah,
third act,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
transitioning or pivoting, and they still have life in them. Their minds are sharp,
Hmm.
but maybe they either willingly, consciously shifted or
Hmm.
pivoted, or they were forced into retirement or doing something that they may not be ready, or they're scared to ask, what if? What can I do?
Hmm.
Any leadership mindfulness tip you have for that person in that stage of life?
Yeah, that's really a tough one, especially because of our society. Our society is not very accepting of the fact that aging is a normal human process. We do everything to not look older or our age even. So that is definitely a hard one. One thing that I have noticed that could be beneficial is two things. If you are at the top of your game, if your path is that you're at the top of your game, and mm, you're thinking, what else can I be striving for? You need to start looking for the legacy. What is the legacy I want to leave? because you are at the top of your game and there's a lot in you. You can design a legacy, and that's something that I do with some of my clients. And they, for example, a person that is 50 something years old and they are planning to work for another 4 or 5 years. How do I leave a legacy when you're at the top of your game? Now, there is another piece that you are done with corporate work. You're not done with working, but you're done with the corporate work. Mhm. You are thinking, what else is in life besides the corporate America? That is it. That is then at that time, then it is when you start looking into purpose, meaning, and values, and then you during that journey somehow magically you will figure out, oh, this is what I want to do to satisfy and fulfill my soul at this point in my life, which couldn't have been possible maybe when they were in their 20s. Now, there is another piece to this, which is you have to work. Financial need, health care, the real reality of the board. You have to work, and you feel like you are not enjoying this anymore, or you're not accepted as before. And then this is become a very hard position. What I would suggest, and I have not worked with anybody in that capacity, so I don't have a lot of experience in that. Most of the people I work with are in the categories 1 and 2. What I would suggest to look into is that what other thing besides this work can satisfy your soul at this time. And it can be very simple things. It can be serving on the board as a volunteer on the board of a nonprofit organization. You will give them 2 3 hours of your time, maybe a month, maybe in 3 months, but you will feel like there are people who value me, because part of that is that you're not being valued for who you are, and that can be a very constant mental battle for a person, which is um very hard.
I also believe this is a little bit of a tangent, but you may have seen this, is that at least in the United States, I cannot completely speak to other countries, but at least in the United States, I feel like the notion of aging and wisdom are not given the level of respect, because I come from a generation where it's Indian culture, but you you respect the elders and you do give them some credibility of what they know. So it's not just about the new and the cutting edge. It's about the fact that at the end of the day, 100, 200 years is not enough to shift human patterns of behavior. The lessons that we have learned for hundreds of thousands of years, that wisdom are the true testaments to how you may see things evolve. So perhaps you could speak to how you've witnessed.
I have witnessed the same thing. We live in a capitalist country. In a capitalist country, as long as you are useful to the system, you are valued.
And I would I've challenged myself, I've been doing it, and I challenge anyone who feels fear that, well, talk to me, reach out to Shilpa or Kathy, because honestly, that notion is going to make you feel small.
Yeah, it is reductionist for sure. But think about this, Shilpa. Like I had another interview yesterday. I mentioned this, and I'm saying this again. Look, Madonna, she is remarkable that at the age of 65, she's able to go sing, be on a tour, perform, have a great body, and people disregard all of these positives, and they start talking about, oh, she has wrinkles. Good morning to you. Is that all you can see out of this astonishing capacity that this person has? She has wrinkles? Yeah, she's 65. What did you expect her to have? I mean, the mentality of the crowd is that the youth is shiny and amazing and all. Look, the beauty industry is a good industry, but we have to look at, I live in a city that there are a lot of plastic surgeons that they make a living out of people's desire to look younger and younger and younger, and they do not necessarily look younger or better even with any amount of money. So can we can we allow ourselves to see the fact that we can age gracefully? That's a cultural shift, and I have to be honest with you, Shilpa. I don't know if we will see that in the majority of a nation, because this is a capitalist country. Unless the nation comes to a understanding that they want to be in a different level of consciousness.
And Kathy, really, this goes back to something that you articulated moments ago, which is you cannot control other people. And while the external conditions and perceptions may not be something we have control over, the one thing we have control over is our own mindfulness, our own
Absolutely.
our own approach. So, do I choose to continually learn and grow and have a learning mindset? Absolutely. Sometimes it's not necessarily because I'd rather do that than go for a walk and have fun. But it allows my brain to continually grow. It keeps me at the cutting edge as necessary. And it also allows, um, I love it. I believe it's like some level of creativity that gives you hope.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It gives, yeah, creativity feeds your soul. So whatever feeds one's soul gives them that feeling of use and feeling of rejuvenation. That's why innovation is so appealing. Um, and each of us can define it differently for ourselves. Look, you, even the old age, yes, I can teach my kids to learn to respect their grandparents for who they are, what they can offer them. And they can offer them all the stories. They cannot offer them advice on AI, right? So, or on Instagram or these things. They can tell them stories of their experiences. What I can teach them is that put your phone aside, be present, listen, be with them. That's all I can teach them, to be able to honor aging. Each of us can look into what is it that I can do if I choose that philosophy. That's a choice. Do I want to honor aging, or do I am I repelled by the fact that a person's skin is wrinkled? This is something that everybody in their own heart needs to sit with and make their own decision.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And this is why I'm so glad I spoke to you about leadership and mindfulness, because you are coming at it from an inside out perspective. And I believe that there's a shift that can occur. And again, it starts from the inside, but knowing that each of us has something so special in us.
Mm. True, true. Each of us has something special in ourselves. That's the beauty of the creation. I mean, um, I think that's the beauty of whoever has created this system. That no two of us will have the same experience in our lifetime ever.
And each of us also has infinite possibilities, um, agnostic to our external age.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% with you. You see that a lot of people say that age is based on your thinking. and maybe there is some truth in there. But we have to understand, this is interesting, the physical body has its own limitations because the physical body ages. And the physical, while we might have a youthful soul, does the body still hold on in par? And that is one of the things that the biology and the AI is going to change. To what extent we shall see, but that is something that is changing. That is something that transformative technology is changing it. We are becoming more aware and more powerful in how we can take care of ourselves if we choose to do so, and if we have the means, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll have you back just to go deeper on that because there's so much more evidence on meditation and how new neural pathways are created. Just imagine when we talk about aging of the brain and
Mm-hmm.
how that affects our perception of how we can send signals to our body and behave and perform. But if we are shifting through mindfulness and meditation, new neural pathways, that can generate your capacity to live longer and be more alert and be more present.
Yes, there can be things that can be used. There is data, there is evidence. I mean, um, it is not all scientific evidence per se, because the literature on this is very limited, because it is very hard to do research on mindfulness. You need a control group, and how can you how big can that control group be? So most of the studies are very samples, a small sample size, and a small sample size, it scientifically you cannot deduce it to a large sample size. But the thing that there, even the research here and there is showing that it can change the cognitive function. It can boost. Now, do I say that there is a direct correlation? No, because science hasn't proved that. Do I say that it can be beneficial? There has been instances that it has been beneficial. By no means I will ever say that this is a recipe for everyone, ever. I really think the thing that keeps the brain young is taking advantage of the neuroplasticity and keeping the brain and thinking flexible. That is scientifically proven. If somebody wants to use mindfulness as part of experiencing with that, there is some research. So you can go and experience, but we have to be careful, because one of the things that I'm very careful about is not to say things that will over promise and under deliver, especially when there is not enough scientific data for it.
Yes, yes. Well, we will definitely have to have a deeper conversation if you're available for a podcast, because I can see us just going deeper into the fact that then we're entering the realm of subtle energy and
Mhm.
understanding that while in the more modern era, especially the Western world or corporate world, you want to see it to believe it, but understanding that there's more to what meets the eye.
I agree with you, and especially in corporate world. I mean, I think maybe that's something that we can discuss. People do not understand the impact of the stressors and the impact of exhaustion in the long term, on their longevity. That is something that is real. Um, you do not see the impact immediate. Nobody sees the impact immediately because the body is young, the cells are young, but in the long run, the exhaust it can increase the rate of exhaustion. So that is something to be really mindful of.
Yes. Well, Kathy, I sincerely could talk about 10 more things that and go deep with you. Thank you so much for your presence, your wisdom, and your heart. And I really felt it. And I truly look forward to a deeper conversation. in the near future with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Shilpa. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. And those who are listening, they can find your contact and ability to work with you in the show notes. And anything you share with me, I will make sure my socials promote it.
I appreciate that.
Have a lovely day.
You too. Thank you.